More than just places to grab a quick meal. They were part of our childhood and also part of the American rhythm, like after-school stops, Friday night treats, a warm booth after a cold shift. They were always there, always affordable, always familiar, and we trusted them for years. But then these restaurants disappeared with no warning and no farewell, leaving behind a big question, that if even these familiar names can vanish. What's still safe in today's America? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal, and today we will reveal 10 fast food chains trusted, now gone forever. Let's see how many names you can still remember. Number 1. Howard Johnson's, long before fast food turned into drive-through speed and microwaved sameness. Families in America knew the orange roof meant something special. Howard Johnson's wasn't just a stop on the highway, but it was the trip at that point. Even though it cannot survive for long, many still remember the sound of a car door slamming in a gravel lot, the smell of fried clams in the air, and the promise of 28 familiar ice cream flavors waiting inside. For millions of Americans from the 50s to the 80s, a meal at Howard Johnson's was more than a bite, but a family tradition, a shared memory between generations packed into the back of station wagons. But time wasn't kind. As interstate highways stretched longer and chains like McDonald's and Wendy's streamlined speed over soul, Howard Johnson's started fading. The warm wood paneling and table service that once felt like home suddenly seemed outdated. One by one, locations closed. We see no drama, just a silence that embraces all memories. Howard Johnson's being forgotten by the very travelers who once couldn't pass one by. The final blow came not from competition, but from mismanagement and scandal. The last so-called Howard Johnson's in Lake George, New York, is a shadow of its former self. A limited-hours diner with a questionable menu, and worse, a former manager arrested for sexual harassment, which a dark stain on a beloved brand's legacy today. Hojo's is more a memory than reality, a flicker of an era when road trips meant maps, laughter, and that glowing orange sign on the horizon. Many Americans from the old generation always wonder if the loss of Howard Johnson's was really just a restaurant losing in business competition. Or was the loss the last place where America still felt like a family number 2? Burger Chef, before Happy Meals. Before the Golden Arches ruled every corner of America, there was Burger Chef, a name now mostly forgotten, but once poised to lead the fast food burger race. And for newbies, it wasn't a small-time player. By the early 1970s, Burger Chef had over 1,200 locations, second only to McDonald's. For a while, it looked like the orange and blue signs might overtake the red and yellow empire. What set Burger Chef apart wasn't just its flame-grilled burgers or retro prices, it was an innovation. They were the first to offer a packaged kids' meal, complete with a toy, drink, burger, and fries. It sounds similar, but the fact is Burger Chef released it years before McDonald's ever launched the Happy Meal. It was called the Fun Meal in the good old days, and it wasn't just another marketing trick. Because once upon a time it brought home so much happiness. Kids begged for it. Parents remembered it and took it as a treat when their children behaved. For a generation. Burger Chef was more than just a restaurant. It was a bright, cartoon-filled destination with characters like Count Fangburger and Burgerini, the magician turning dinner into a memory. But innovation didn't protect it from corporate betrayal. In 1979, McDonald's introduced the Happy Meal, well known till this day. Burger Chef tried to fight back legally, claiming their idea had been stolen, but the lawsuit was buried for some mysterious reasons, and so was the brand. Then the parent company sold it off. Many locations were quietly converted into Hardee's by the early 80s. The colors changed, the toys disappeared, and just like that, an once beloved chain vanished from the map. Today, barely anyone under 50 remembers the jingle, the colors, and the joy that seems too far away. And maybe that's the saddest part. Not just that it's gone, but that America forgot it ever mattered at all. What's about you? What's your impression about Burger Chef? Do you think that if Burger Chef wins the lawsuit, it could replace McDonald's nowadays and even serve us better food than McDonald's greasy meal number 3, Ginos Hamburgers? Not every great American restaurant was born from a boardroom. Some came straight from heart, sweat, and a dream, like Ginos Hamburgers, founded by Gino Marchetti, the legendary Baltimore Colts football star. This chain started as more than just a business venture. It was a hometown promise to serve up bold, honest food that families could afford and trust. and in the mid-Atlantic region. People didn't just know Ginos, they belonged to it. The menu was simple, but unforgettable. The giant burger, paired with fries, became the signature meal for working-class families across Baltimore, Philadelphia, and beyond. People lined up at the neon-lit counters, eager for a taste of something that felt both local and legendary. Ginos merged early on with Tops Drive-In, creating a powerhouse duo that brought familiar comfort with every bite. For years, it thrived. But expansion beyond its roots proved costly. When Ginos tried pushing into the Northeast, it lost the hometown soul that had made it special. Corporate decisions took over, and in the mid-1980s, the Marriott Corporation bought Ginos out and quietly buried the brand. No fanfare, no tribute, just gone. Today, a reimagined offshoot Ginos Burgers and Chicken still exists in limited spots, echoing the original name. But to those who remember the glory days, it's not quite the same. The original Ginos was more than just burgers. It was football pride. It was family night after church. It was knowing the guy behind the counter probably cheered with you last Sunday. And maybe what hurts most is knowing that kind of neighborhood pride doesn't fit inside today's fast food chains anymore. Number 4. Red Barn. Once upon a time, there stood a giant red barn on the edge of nearly every American highway. Promising more than just a meal, it promised a new kind of fast food. Red Barn was bold. It dared to challenge the Colonel himself in the fried chicken wars. And for a brief, glorious stretch, it almost won. With locations stretching from the United States to Canada, and even across the Pacific to Australia. Red Barn was more than a regional success. It was global ambition, wrapped in a deep-fried drumstick. Unlike most chains of the era, Red Barn wasn't content to follow trends. It created them. Long before salad bars became standard, Red Barn introduced one. Their pressure-cooked fried chicken was crisp, juicy, and made in equipment designed specifically for their kitchens. And the burgers bigger than most, with a flavor that regulars swore couldn't be matched. Add to that a cast of quirky animated mascots like Hamburger Hungry and Chicken Hungry, and the experience felt like a fairground that served real food. But like many bright sparks, Red Barn's downfall came not from food, but from the corporate chessboard. Its parent company, United Servomation, saw more value in real estate than roast chicken. As leases quietly expired, Red Barn restaurants were abandoned, not sold, not saved, just left behind. No marketing campaigns, no farewell tour. One by one, they fell into silence. Many former Red Barns were converted into McDonald's, erasing the last physical traces of a chain that once dared to be different. Today, only memories remain. But for those who remember walking into that familiar red roof, the loss feels like watching your childhood erased by a spreadsheet. Number 5. Sambos. Names hold weight. They carry memory, meaning, and sometimes, the burden of history. Sambo's began as a clever portmanteau, a blend of founder Sam Battistone and Newell Bonnett's names, but quickly stumbled into controversy that would follow the brand for decades. What may have seemed like an innocent business name in the late 1950s soon became tangled in racial tensions, especially as the chain leaned heavily into imagery from The Story of Little Black Sambo, a children's book that, while originally progressive in intent, became deeply problematic over time, in its heyday. Sambo's wasn't just successful, it was everywhere. With over 1,100 locations at its peak, the brand sold itself on affordability and convenience. Ads promised hearty meals for just $1.99, served all day and night. The food was comforting, the booths familiar, and for many Americans, it was a stop on family road trips or late-night cravings. But the cheerful murals, the cartoon mascots, and the name all carried a troubling subtext that became impossible to ignore. By the 1970s, civil rights groups and everyday Americans began calling out the branding as racially insensitive. Protests grew, and franchises across the country responded by rebranding under new names: Jolly Tiger, No Place Like Sam's, and others, but the damage was already done. The name Sambo's had become a symbol of something darker than pancakes and coffee. In a final chapter that felt long overdue, the last remaining Sambo's restaurant in Santa Barbara, operated by Sam Battistone's grandson, was renamed Chad's in the year 2020, following nationwide protests after the death of George Floyd. It was the end of an era, but also an overdue acknowledgement that a meal doesn't exist in a vacuum. It comes with history, and sometimes, that history demands change. Number 6. Frells Ice Cream Parlor. Few places could make a child feel like royalty and a grown-up feel like a kid again, but Frells Ice Cream Parlor did exactly that. From its opening in 1963, Frells wasn't just about ice cream. It was about joy, noise, and laughter served in absurdly large bowls. Pianos played non-stop. Waiters ran through the aisles ringing bells and shouting birthdays, and monster sundaes arrived on trays carried like royal treasures. It was theatrical, chaotic, and utterly unforgettable. The charm of Frells went beyond the sugar rush. Its menu came printed like a comedic tabloid, filled with over-the-top headlines, corny jokes, and fake low-calorie items like diet water. It was a place that didn't just let you indulge, it cheered you on as you did. Birthdays weren't just celebrated, they were performed. Entire families gathered just to see the volcano or zoo sundaes arrive in bowls the size of small bathtubs, drawing gasps and applause from everyone nearby. But behind the laughter, the cracks were forming. In the 80s, Marriott acquired the chain, and the spirit began to change. Corporate restructuring brought debt and decisions that diluted the brand's wild personality. Locations were trimmed, costs were cut. The chaos that once made Frells electric slowly quieted. By 2019, the last Frells had closed its doors, not with fanfare but with silence. Today, for those who remember, Frells lives on as a memory of a louder, sweeter, sillier America, a place where birthdays were sacred, calories were fiction, and joy was served in 12 scoops or more. Number 7. Little Tavern. In the days before drive-thrus and neon signs, there was a kind of quiet comfort in knowing that wherever you were in Baltimore or Washington, D.C., a warm, greasy burger from Little Tavern was never far away. With their signature slogan, "Buy 'em by the bag," Little Tavern offered more than just food. It offered familiarity, routine, and a place where the working man could grab a meal without emptying his pocket. By 1950, there were over 50 locations in the Baltimore-Washington corridor alone, tucked into neighborhoods, glowing through the night. At first, Little Tavern didn't try to hide its inspiration. Its early architecture mirrored the popular designs of White Castle and White Tower, both giants in the hamburger game at the time, but rather than fade into imitation, Little Tavern grew into its own, later embracing a charming Tudor-style cottage design that gave it a quirky, nostalgic identity all its own. The inside was tight, the service was fast, and the food was reliably satisfying. It wasn't fancy, but it was dependable, and that meant everything to the communities it served. The decline began after founder Harry F. Duncan sold the company in 1981, without his steady hand. The chain slowly began to falter. Ownership changed, priorities shifted, and locations began closing one by one. By the time the early 2000s rolled around, Little Tavern was more memory than meal. In 2008, the last official shop closed its doors. Today, only echoes remain. One location in Laurel. Maryland, now renamed Laurel Tavern Donuts, holds the original recipes, offering a hint of what once was. But the chain that once stood on nearly every corner in Baltimore has vanished. And for older generations who grew up counting on its small, green and white storefronts, the loss isn't just about burgers, it's about the disappearing landmarks of a simpler, sturdier America. Number 8. Pup & Taco. In an era when most fast food joints stuck to either burgers or tacos, Pup & Taco simply shrugged and asked why not both. From the sun-soaked streets of Southern California in the 1950s through the laid-back 70s, Pup & Taco was a local favorite that didn't make you choose. Craving a chili dog and a taco done. Throw in a slushie and maybe a pastrami sandwich while you're at it. This wasn't just a drive-in, it was a buffet of Californian comfort, wrapped in wax paper and handed through a window. At its peak, Pup & Taco had nearly 100 locations across California and even into New Mexico. It stood out not just because of its unusual name, but because of what it stood for: fast food without rules. The menu was eclectic, and that was the charm. Where else could you wash down a beef tostada with a grape slush and call it lunch? It wasn't just locals who noticed. Pup & Taco found its way into Hollywood, earning mentions in pop culture most memorably in the comedy film Fletch. The quirky name, the nostalgic neon signs, and the promise of everything from everywhere made it a beloved backdrop to West Coast life. But by the mid-1980s, the tide had turned. Taco Bell, hungry to dominate the Mexican fast food space, bought up nearly all Pup and Taco locations. The name vanished. The menu was erased. And with it went a brand that never played by the rules but had once made breaking them delicious. Today, few remember the oddball chain that once gave you tacos, dogs, and pastrami under the same roof. But for those who do, it wasn't just food, it was California in a paper tray. Number 9, Wags. It's hard to imagine walking into a restaurant with the same logo as your neighborhood pharmacy, but in the 1970s and 80s, Walgreens gave it a real shot. The result, Wags, a 24-hour diner chain that tried to serve up pancakes and meatloaf under the shadow of a cold remedy empire. And for a while, it almost worked. Wags wasn't just an experiment, it was Walgreens' bold leap into the world of casual dining. These diners had everything you'd expect: all-day breakfast, bottomless coffee, and laminated menus packed with diner classics, positioned to compete directly with Denny's and IHOP. Wags offered working-class Americans a place to gather, eat, and unwind anytime, day or night. In big cities and small towns, Wags signs lit up parking lots alongside Walgreens stores, as if inviting customers to heal the body and feed the soul in one stop. But the concept ran into a wall. For many, eating dinner under the same branding as where you bought cough syrup just felt off. The overlap between retail pharmacy and sit-down comfort food never sat quite right with diners. And as the economic tide shifted in the late 1980s, Walgreens decided to pull the plug. In 1988, the entire Wags chain was sold to the Marriott Corporation. Locations were gradually shuttered or rebranded, turned into Shoney's, IHOPs, or forgotten entirely. The unique blend of diner warmth and corporate pharmacy DNA simply couldn't hold. Today, Wags exists only in memory, a strange, nostalgic collision of omelets and over-the-counter medicine, for those who remember. It was a quirky little piece of America that dared to serve eggs and aspirin in the same breath and almost got away with it. Number 10, Minnie Pearl's Fried Chicken. Back in the days when country music was king and television variety shows lit up every living room, Minnie Pearl was a household name. Her big hat, warm twang, and contagious charm made her an American treasure. So when a fried chicken chain bearing her name launched in the late 1960s, it seemed like a golden recipe for success. After all, who better to represent Southern cooking than the Queen of Grand Ole Opry herself? Minnie Pearl's Fried Chicken wasn't just another copycat. It quickly exploded across the South and Midwest, joining a wave of celebrity-backed restaurants at the time. The branding was warm and familiar, wrapped in gingham charm and Southern pride. Folks lined up to try what the signs promised was the best chicken going. And for a while, it felt like the beginning of something huge. But behind the smiling logo, the business was wobbling. Each franchisee was allowed to tweak the recipe, leading to wildly different flavors from one store to the next. Some customers got juicy, golden crisp chicken, others got dry, bland disappointments. The lack of consistency eroded trust. But it wasn't what killed the brand. The real collapse came when accusations of fraudulent stock manipulation hit the headlines. The SEC stepped in, investigations mounted. Turns out the hype around Minnie Pearl's wasn't just about chicken, it was about inflated numbers, questionable deals, and promises that never matched the books. What began with Southern hospitality ended with federal probes. By the mid-70s, most locations were shuttered, and Minnie Pearl's name, once a symbol of joy and laughter, was left tangled in scandal. For those who remember, the food might have been hit or miss, but the fall of the brand was unforgettable. A reminder that not every smiling face on a billboard guarantees what's on your plate. Number 11, Wetsons, in a city that never sleeps, where competition moves as fast as the subways and tastes shift with every passing block. Standing out is everything. Wetsons, a once promising fast food chain based in the greater New York area, never quite found its own voice. Founded in 1959, it arrived at the table just as giants like McDonald's and White Castle were solidifying their place in American culture. Instead of carving its own lane, Wetsons chose to mimic, and that choice may have sealed its fate. The chain's signature burger. The Big W was a not-so-subtle nod to the Big Mac, and its marketing slogans often danced dangerously close to already famous catchphrases. While the intention may have been to ride the wave of national fast food fever, it left Wetsons looking like a follower rather than a leader. And in the fast food world, especially in New York, being second best just isn't enough. Yet for a while, Wetsons had its loyalists. The restaurants had a cozy, familiar atmosphere, and for many East Coast families in the 60s and early 70s, Wetsons was their local burger joint. It offered affordable meals, late-night stops, and a taste of fast food Americana at a time when dining out was still a special treat. But the pace of progress was brutal. McDonald's expanded aggressively, Burger King innovated, and Wetsons, stuck in imitation, couldn't keep up. By 1975, Wetsons merged with Nathan's Famous, and the last of its standalone signs came down. Though the trademark still lingers quietly in New York, Wetsons is no longer part of the conversation. A few old-timers may remember the Big W, but for most, it faded into the city's fast-moving past, another small dream swallowed by bigger brands in a world that only remembers the winners. Number 12, Jerry's Hamburgers. In the heartland of America, where highways stretch wide and towns pride themselves on no-nonsense living, Jerry's Hamburgers once stood as a humble contender in the great burger race. Founded and led by a former McDonald's vice president, Jerry's was no accident. It was a carefully planned response to the growing giants, aimed squarely at giving the folks of Illinois and Wisconsin something different: simplicity, speed, and a burger you could eat in your truck without ever stepping out. Jerry's built its early reputation on a model that broke from the norm. While most chains at the time leaned into sit-down service and cafeteria-style interiors, Jerry's embraced takeout from the start. Their small roadside buildings were almost entirely kitchen, with barely enough room for a handful of customers inside. This no-frills model struck a chord with working-class drivers, commuters, and families who wanted hot food fast, not a dining experience. But time wasn't kind. As competitors evolved, customers began expecting more indoor seating, expanded menus, bigger brand polish. Jerry's tried to adapt, adding limited seating and expanding their offerings. But by then, the market had shifted. The rise of Burger King, Wendy's, and the unstoppable McDonald's left little room for a regional underdog clinging to a lean business model. The original chain faded out by 1981. Sporadic attempts to revive the Jerry's name happened through the 90s, with the final location closing in 1999. A few hopeful franchisees even tried again in the early 2000s, but the era had passed. Today, Jerry's lives on mostly in memory, a reminder of when a burger wasn't about branding or Instagram photos, just paper-wrapped comfort handed through a small window, with steam still rising and a promise of something honest. Number 13, Winkies, in Pittsburgh and its surrounding towns. There was a time when hunger came with a smile because Winkies was waiting on nearly every corner, ready to serve up a burger and a joke. Launched in 1962 by the Ehrenstein brothers, Winkies wasn't just a restaurant, it was a clever extension of their meat distribution empire. If you're already grinding beef for grocery stores, why not flip it into burgers and fry it for the public too? That was the simple but brilliant idea behind Winkies. And for a while, it worked like a charm. With names like Big Wink and Ground Rounder, Winkies burgers weren't just meals, they were part of the show. Quirky TV ads, upbeat jingles, and a marketing slogan that promised to make you happy to be hungry gave the brand personality and charm. Free turnovers with dinner, milkshakes spinning at the counter, fish and chips with a Pittsburgh twist. It wasn't just a burger joint. It was a place families looked forward to visiting. More than anything, Winkies sold freshness. The Ehrenstein brothers' access to their own meat supply chain meant they could promise what many couldn't: ground beef that hadn't been sitting in a truck for days. That edge built trust in the community, especially when big national chains felt colder, more corporate. But even with all the optimism, Winkies couldn't survive the economic downturn that hit western Pennsylvania in the late 70s and early 80s. Steel mills were closing, jobs were disappearing, and the money that used to buy big winks and fries now went toward gas bills and groceries. By 1982, the final Winkies closed its doors. Today, it lives on in memory, a hometown brand that fed people not just with food, but with personality, pride, and a reminder that fast food could still feel personal. Do these names bring back memories? If you've got a favorite that didn't make the list, let us know in the comments. And if you want more forgotten flavors and untold stories, be sure to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a moment from the past we all share.